Well, good evening, everyone. And my name is Angeline Constantino, and I am the founder, life coach, and podcaster of Let's Break the Silence with Angeline. So, welcome to my podcast and the broadcast. Um, Let's Break the Silence with Angeline. Please like and subscribe to my podcast on Anchor FM, Spotify, Google, Apple, and all the live streams. And we launch our podcast episodes every Monday morning at 7 a.m. And my podcast, we bring real life stories of domestic abuse survivors who are thriving and have regained their power. And this is a platform for women to share their stories and amplify their voice. And also, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Angeline Mitchell. So I'm really super excited tonight because we have a special guest. We had the pleasure of connecting through a network, and her name is Julie Hall. So tonight we're going to be talking about empowerment and healing for sexual and domestic abuse survivors. So Julie Hall holds a bachelor's of science in economics from New York University, a master's in business administration from Rutgers University, and a master's of science in marriage and therapy from Seattle Pacific University. She is also completing a postgraduate certification program in trauma-informed counseling of NYU's at NYU School of Social Work. Julie works with students, parents, couples, and families around many issues, including anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and trauma. In addition, she has walked many engaged, committed couples through premarital counseling. In part due to her own life experiences, Julie also has a deep desire to walk alongside women and couples who are experiencing fertility challenges and has provided clinical support and facilitation um, for the Pacific Northwest mind body fertility programs in Seattle. She has also experienced in facilitating various support groups for sexual abuse recovery and coping with divorce and grief. And this is a very important topic that that we are going to bring to light tonight. So without further ado, here's Julie.
Hi,
Hi, Julie. Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's really good to be here, Angeline.
It's it's great to have you here tonight on my podcast. And please tell the viewers and the listeners who are going to be, listening to this live podcast episode I'm sorry, the time. What is the time right now where you are?
It's 7:35 p.m.
So we're in the same time zone.
Yes, we are. We are.
Yeah.
Eastern time.
Yeah. So that's great. All right. So Julie, your story really inspires me. You talk about life experience.
Yeah.
So please tell the viewers who are going to be actually watching tonight or catching the replay, you know, who is Julie Hall? Where did she come from?
Yeah. So my background is I am Indian American. So my parents came to the States in the 70s. I was born and raised in New Jersey, but grew up kind of in this bicultural experience, right? Where, my parents came from this Indian, pretty traditional cultural experience, and I grew up in Western American culture. And so I have been, kind of navigating the dualism of that. And, in my journey, so I actually, before I went to school for marriage and family therapy, I was in tech for about 10 years. I worked in corporate, I worked in nonprofit, I worked in the government, I worked in startup, all sort of different, sectors, around the tech industry. And at the time, my my spouse and I, we had gotten married. We were trying to have children, and we really struggled trying to have children. We struggled with fertility issues, and I'll tell you a little story, Angeline. So I remember working with a doctor who was trying to help us get pregnant, and the doctor kind of slipped across the table a business card for me, and it was the business card of his colleague who also worked in, in that facility, and she was a therapist. And
Right.
he said to me, you might benefit from speaking to somebody. And to be honest with you, Angeline, I was kind of offended because I just, we were already struggling kind of with biological issues around, getting pregnant. And the
Right.
message that I was receiving from this doctor, it wasn't saying anything, harsh, but the meaning that I was making of it was he was saying that like there's something wrong with me mentally now. Right. Which is why he was giving me this business card of a therapist. Right. That was just the meaning that I was making of it. Right.
Right.
And because I didn't grow up with therapy being affirmed at all, right? That wasn't something that people did, around me. If you had issues, you really kept it quiet. You didn't talk about it, right? It was all right. So breaking the silence, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was all hush hush, right? Nobody talked about mental health issues, emotional health issues, right? You went to the doctor if something was wrong with you physically, but never anything else. And so I kind of grew up with those narratives around therapy, right? It was for the people who were really, really, like messed up, right? Not for somebody like me, And so these were narratives that I was carrying around with me, and obviously they were incredibly inaccurate and problematic narratives. So all that said, he hands me this business card of a therapist, and something within me, as much as I held these narratives that, therapy isn't for me, right? Therapy isn't for, that's for like the people who are really in bad shape, right? As much as I held those narratives, something within me was telling me that I needed to go.
Wow.
Yeah, something within me was communicating to me I needed to go, right? I needed to enter into that therapeutic space. And so I met with a therapist, that same therapist, and it was like the floodgates opened. I just started making all of these beautiful connections, and it was just, I had no idea how much I was holding within me, right? How much pain and hurt that I was holding within. And I walked out of there, and it was just this wild experience. I just remember feeling immense relief, real curiosity about what this therapeutic experience is. And it was beautiful. And it really started me along this journey of going back to school and entirely changing my career so that I could actually be on the other end supporting people on their own mental, emotional health journey.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you say about the floodgates being open,
Yeah.
I can just imagine what happened. I can just imagine, what did that feel like?
It was so powerful, Angeline. Again, because I grew up with this idea that therapy was bad in some ways. Like it was not okay. It was not okay to ask for help. If I was struggling emotionally or mentally, if I was struggling with it, I had to keep it quiet. Like there was, I think, just such a shame somehow in like the way that I had made meaning of therapy was there was like such a shame in being in asking for help and reaching for help. And so to actually step into that space and be met with compassion and care and understanding and validation, it was like it was just an indescribable experience for me.
Wow.
Completely changed the trajectory of my life.
Oh, I could just imagine. And
Yeah,
see, this is the problem that we have even today. Now, more and more women are coming out sharing or admitting, taking ownership
I know
that they have gone through domestic violence or they have gone through sexual assault.
it. I know it.
And there's such a stigma out there because, like myself, who
Yeah,
came out of it in 2011, I finally took ownership. It took forever, but I did. I took ownership. There
yeah.
was so much shame. I felt ashamed. I felt, especially like for myself, coming from a Greek family, it was like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, you can't say anything.
Right.
So, do you work with women from different cultures? I mean, that was another question. Like, what inspired you to enter the mental health field? And, regarding your clients, I know because I did read that you do work with sexual abuse and domestic abuse survivors. So, if you can
Mm.
just talk about that, that would be great for the listeners.
Yeah. I think that was part of it is it, just kind of from sharing my story, it's just how much the experience meant to me, right? Coming from a background in which therapy, seeking mental health support was not affirmed, right? I
Mhm.
just, my own personal experience of recognizing how much it really, saved me, right? Just that beautiful experience of feeling seen and known and validated was just so powerful for me that, I wanted to essentially be able to give that in some capacity to other people who were also maybe feeling like they couldn't, they were blocked mentally or emotionally, or they were in pain. And so I just wanted to kind of learn how to be on the other side for people. And in fact, when I first started, really for women in particular. And so that's really what brought me into the space of becoming a therapist after really being in tech and changing my whole life. And so to your question about, do I work with people from other cultures? Yes. And it is very unique. I think one of the things that I find particularly unique is that, a lot of cultures, outside of the Western culture, a lot of cultures, there is this real stigma around emotional, mental pain or seeking support. There's just, I think, this image that people kind of want to portray that keeps us from reaching for each other, keeps us from
Huh.
connection, and so I think that's something that in my therapeutic work, I think is really important um, to encourage my clients that, in fact, what they are going through is, just mirroring for them that what they are going through is very real and is very painful and is very difficult. And, I think particularly for people who have navigated, you know, um, domestic violence or sexual abuse, breaking the stigma that, it was in any part something that they have to own, that is their responsibility to carry, that in any way was their responsibility to hold, and that to really give them permission to talk about it without the shame. I think shame is such a massive block for us in
Mhm.
being able to access healing and being able to access connection.
Right, exactly, exactly. And when COVID happened,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was not a good thing, which is one of the things that inspired. I was inspired to start my podcast right before COVID happened, not knowing that
Mhm.
COVID was going to happen. And now all of a sudden you have couples. I mean, it's bad enough as it is, and the woman couldn't go to a shelter. It's always the woman who has to leave.
Mhm.
Yeah, always the woman who has to leave.
Mhm.
That happened
Mhm.
to me, but like there were, women who couldn't escape.
I know, I believe it. And that's, I think there was, for me, when I was working during COVID, well, number one, my client load shot up about 300%.
I believe it.
Yeah. And if your marriage or your relationship or partnership was starting to see cracks before COVID, it was like disintegrating so fast during COVID. Right. This kind of, not being able to have access to your other kinds of support systems. It just was, a petri dish for, in fact, in some ways, danger, right? Danger. Yeah.
A lot of danger. Yeah.
And so, I just have a real heart for women in particular, not to say that men and, don't have to navigate domestic violence, but my heart initially, originally when I stepped into this work was particularly for women, because there just has been so much violence and oppression of women globally, historically, and I just love what you do, Angeline, and
Thank you.
breaking the silence, because I really do believe that it's in the secrets that our shame grows. And when we can actually bring what is happening to us and what has happened to us in the light, there is so much relief, right? That you can essentially reach for a lifeline, that you are no longer alone in this.
Right. Exactly. And I realized myself that I wasn't alone. And this goes back to 2010, 2011. But I know what happened with me, like my business went way up.
Yeah.
It shot up. I couldn't keep up. I'm like, oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
And still, I mean, you see, like I have TikTok. So on TikTok, there's a lot of women sharing their stories about domestic violence, because this is an issue that, and this is one of the reasons that inspired me to have my podcast. And thank God, because you're here tonight, okay, sharing your story and breaking the silence. We need to break the stigma and the silence on mental health.
100%. 100%. We do need to break the stigma around mental health and receiving mental health support. I think about, what if we treated our emotional and mental health the way that, in a lot of ways, the mainstream treats physical health, right?
Exactly.
It's like no big, if you have an earache, you go to the doctor, right? And yet we struggle so deeply with emotional and mental burden, oftentimes by ourselves, right? And I just think it's such a powerful experience for people to be able to sit in a therapeutic space and share their story. And it's not easy. It is not easy. I really believe it is, and I treat it as such, that when a client comes into my office, every time, that it is courageous work. They are doing the really hard, courageous, vulnerable work in speaking about something that perhaps has not been in the light yet, right?
Right.
Is not something that they've necessarily spoken about. And so I really try to hold it with utmost honor and compassion for every client that, sits across from me.
Exactly. Now, I know on your website you do talk about compassion, empowerment, and safety building. Can you just elaborate on that and how you work with your clients? Because now, you do work with sexual and domestic abuse survivors. So, yeah, I'm sure people, the listeners here, and the viewers who are going to be watching the replay, they would love to know more about what you do. And
Totally. That's right. It's compassion, empowerment. So I'll share a little bit about kind of my modality of therapy. Is that all right?
yes, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
So So I'm trained, as you mentioned, Angeline, as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And particularly, the reason that I chose that avenue of mental health or therapy is because really of the way that marriage and family therapy looks at the issues that all of us face. And generally, the lens with which marriage and family therapy looks at our issues is the lens of relationship. So if I were to boil down the relational experience into its most primal parts, it wouldn't be love or hate, like or dislike. It would be safety and danger. Safety and danger. Those are the most primal places of the relational experience. And so the safer I am, the more that I show up as my authentic self, the more that I can fully show up, the more that I feel like I am in danger, right? The more that I show up in my threat response behaviors, right? Okay. And so what I try to really what I try to do with every client is first and foremost, do a little bit of family history work. And so in family history work, we're looking at 3 areas. We're looking at 3 generations of family. So if you're a client and you sit with me, I will talk with you or ask you questions about 3 generations of your family, your grandparents, your parents, and then your generation. And we're looking for, the first component that we're looking for is patterns. And by patterns, what I mean are things like, how was love given? How was love received? What did conflict look like? What were some of the communication styles in your home, right? Even just generationally, right, in your home. And then we look at something called narratives. And by narratives, it's essentially the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the story that we tell ourselves about the world around us, right? And generally, when we're children, those are not stories that just sort of come out of nowhere. Those are stories that are given to us. And so what I mean are things like, what do we consider to be good? What do we consider to be bad? Who do we consider to be good? Who do we consider to be bad? What are some of the things that we value, right? What are some of the things that our family believes, deems, are measures of success? What are measures of failure? So we look at narratives, we look at patterns, and then the third thing that we look at is trauma. What are some of the traumas that have happened in the generational history? And by trauma, the definition that I have found to be the most profound of trauma is one by an author. His name is Resma Menakem, and he says trauma is anything that happened to us that was too much too fast, too much too long, or not enough too long, where we did not receive adequate support and care. Anything that happened to us that was too much too fast, too much too long, or not enough too long.
Now, see?
Yeah. And so we're looking at those 3 areas of family history for 2 reasons, right? So we'll talk about empowerment. The 2 reasons we're looking at is because often, we ask ourselves the question of, what is wrong with me? I think a lot of times when we are in abusive relationships, we can be given that message explicitly that there is something wrong with us.
Right, exactly.
Right. And then there is this, there can be a critic in the household where that critic's voice is really loud, or maybe it's, a parent whose critical voice was really loud and a voice that we essentially then just absorb and took on. And what we really try to practice in the therapeutic space is really deconstructing, breaking down that critical voice and replacing it with a voice that is compassionate.
There you go.
Right? Because what we believe, what the research shows is that it is, self-compassion is not just kind of a nice way of talking to ourselves. It is that, but in fact, it actually opens up the centers of our brain that tell us we are capable of growth and change. So not only is self-compassion a nice, a kind way of speaking to ourselves, but it in fact it accelerates our growth.
There you go.
right? So
Mm.
it's such a powerful practice, speaking to ourselves from a place of compassion, which replaces the question of what's wrong with me to what happened to me? What
Mhm.
happened to me that in fact caused me to behave this way? That in
Right.
fact
Exactly.
made,
Exactly.
right, that in fact made these kinds of behaviors that I'm exhibiting ones that have been adapted for me.
You see that?
Yeah.
And have your clients been able to break generational curses?
It's hard, Angeline. It is
Yeah.
hard. But yes, I have seen real victory in those spaces.
Thank
I
goodness.
have seen real victory in those spaces. And it really comes from the courage of each and every one of my clients showing up and doing the hard work. And my intention is to meet them with support, with care, with validation, even mirroring for them what self-compassion could look like in those spaces, what it looks like to replace these critical, harsh voices with voices that are ones that are in fact authentically ours, right?
Exactly. Right. Because you know what? We could be our own worst enemy
I
and
know,
our own worst critics.
I know, I
So
know.
just replacing like what you were talking about, because we speak our realities into existence. So it's almost like we have to reframe our mind.
It's so much of mindset work, you know. The other, component of this, what I always believe, what I say is that we have this kind of inverse direct relationship between anxiety and empowerment. What I mean by that is the more anxious we are, generally it's because we are feeling incredibly disempowered, right? So the more anxious we are, the less empowered we feel. The
Right.
less anxious we are, generally, the more empowered we are feeling. So there's this really powerful inverse correlation between anxiety and empowerment. And so what I really try to practice with clients is helping them tap into places and spaces where they can recognize they can make choices. They can make choices. And what are those choices that we can make? And sometimes, for survivors, or particularly when you are in the throes of a violent situation, it doesn't feel like we have many choices. And that's where we do safety planning, and we do, the kind of work to just help them come into a place that is safe, first and foremost.
Exactly. They have to feel safe.
They have to feel safe to do any of this work, 100%.
So you do individual sessions, then do you do group therapy, or is it just individual?
I have done group therapy. It's been a while since I've done
Mm.
group therapy in my own practice, but I have done group therapy in my history. Generally, when I meet with a client, they are in a place where they are physically safe, right? They're physically safe. They're physically out of a violent or abusive situation. And we are working through processing the trauma,
There
processing
you go.
what happened to them,
There you go. There you go.
you
I was
know?
just going to say that because it's important for them to be in a safe space. So after they've transitioned
That's
out of domestic abuse, what do I do now? I mean, there's a lot of things a lot of inner work that has to be done.
there's a lot of inner work that has to be done. And, part of it is, um, I think one of the things that we really look at is what are some of my triggers? What are some of the things that activate me, right? It could be a smell. It could be, a sound. It could be something that I see that activates this kind of threat response in me that
Right.
my body says, am I okay? Am I safe? Right? It's almost like we have to kind of recalibrate my understanding of safety and danger, because does that make sense what I mean?
Yes, it does make sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, like what is real danger and what is this perception of danger that my body has because I'm reminded of something through the
Right.
sensory experience, right?
Right. And how long does it take them to heal from this?
That really varies. It varies based on, I really believe everybody, nobody wants to be stuck. Nobody wants to be stuck. But for some people, moving to a place of healing can be harder than for others, right? Because of their own blocks, because of their family history, because of the depth and the rootedness of some of these old stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I was just going to say that.
Yeah. And so, for some it's just harder than others. But what we are really, I think, in the therapeutic space trying to break through, first and foremost, it's not the story that I tell myself about somebody else or about the world around me. It is the story that I tell myself about myself.
There you go.
Who am I? Right? Exactly what you said. Can I be empowered? Am I an empowered person? Like moving from that place of disempowerment. I am alone. I am rejected. I am unloved. I am worthy. I am unworthy of goodness, to the new story, new narrative that I am worthy of love, worthy of goodness,
Exactly.
that I am connected, right? That I am empowered, that I belong. So that's the most powerful, I think, shift from my witness, is going from not stories I tell myself about the world around me, but the story I tell myself about myself.
There you go. And same here. Same here. The power of I am is truly amazing.
Yes, the power of I am is truly amazing. And that takes work.
And it takes work. Right. Exactly. So we're coming up to a little bit. Oh, I think someone is commenting. Let's see. Oh, that's my friend George. Hi, George.
Aw, hello.
Aww. So
Beautiful.
we're coming up to almost the top of the hour. So what I would like, and I want to thank you for taking the time from your schedule because you shed light on a lot of things tonight, a lot of things, and we broke the silence tonight because this needs to get out to the world. So what's a special message that you would love to share with the audience tonight?
I think what I want the audience, I think, to know is that their story is worthy of being told, that they are worthy of being seen and known and cared for. And, I go back to just what you shared, Angeline, which is there is so much power in the I am, right? What you are worthy of.
There
Right?
you go.
And that's really what, no matter what has been told to you, right, in your history, in your past, whatever message that you received, that there can be freedom and there can be empowerment. And there are people who are wanting to be there and support you in your journey.
Exactly. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Now, where can people reach you?
The best place to reach me, I think, is my website, juliehalltherapy.com. There's my contact information on the website, more information about me. You can email me at juliehalltherapy at gmail.com. That's also on the website. And I would be happy to speak with anyone and go a little bit deeper on just what we talked about.
Good, good, awesome. So, for those of you who are going to be watching the replay here, this is Julie's website. So, please get in contact with her. She will book I think you said a 20-minute session, right?
Yep.
Okay,
We can always have just a 20-minute consult call and go from there.
All right, good, perfect. So wow, this was a great live tonight. So, Julie, hang out with me just for a few minutes after.
Of course.
So, I want to thank those who tuned in tonight. And for those of you who are going to be catching the replay, it will be here on my YouTube channel. Please share this out with a friend who needs to hear this message, because obviously we need to break the silence and the stigma on mental health. And Julie shared some golden nuggets here tonight. So we are coming to the end of the broadcast. So please like and subscribe to my podcast, Let's Break the Silence with Angeline, on Anchor FM, Spotify, Google, Apple, and all the live streams. We launch live new episodes every Monday morning at 7 a.m. And please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Angeline Mitchell. So everyone have a blessed night, and we will see you on the next live broadcast. Bye for now.